The 1890s were a wild time. Things were changing fast. One of the biggest changes was the bicycle. It was new, and everyone wanted one. Or, at least, many people did. It wasn't just a toy. It was a machine that promised freedom, especially for women. And that's where things got complicated. Before the bike, women's lives were pretty restricted. They wore long, heavy dresses. They didn't often go out alone. Their world was small, mostly focused on home and family. Then the bicycle came along. It was a simple invention, really. 2 wheels, pedals, a seat. But it completely upended how people thought about movement and about women. At first, bikes were expensive. Only rich people could afford them. But soon they got cheaper. More and more people bought them. Streets filled with cyclists. It was a craze. People loved the speed. They loved the feeling of moving under their own power. It was exciting, it was liberating. For men, cycling was an extension of their freedom. They could go further, faster, they could explore. For women, it was even more revolutionary. It gave them a way to leave their homes without a chaperone. It gave them a sense of independence they hadn't known before. They could travel miles on their own, they could meet friends, they could see the world beyond their immediate neighborhood. But this new freedom came with a lot of baggage. Not everyone was happy about women on bikes. Some people thought it was scandalous. They worried about women being too active. They worried about them being out in public unchaperoned. They worried about their health. And their morals. The bicycle also forced changes in fashion. Those long dresses weren't practical for cycling. They could get caught in the wheels. So women started wearing shorter skirts, or even bloomers, pants. That was a huge deal. It was shocking to some people. It was seen as unfeminine. It was seen as a step towards moral decay. And this feeling of unease, this fear of women's newfound freedom, it needed a name. And it needed a way to justify the concerns. It needed a medical explanation. That's how Bicycle Face was born. It became a way to try and put women back in their place, to scare them off their bikes. It was a strange and interesting moment in history, a moment when a simple machine caused a whole lot of social anxiety. So the bike arrived, it brought excitement and change, it brought freedom, especially for women. But it also brought fear. It stirred up old anxieties about gender roles. It made people look for reasons to dislike this new thing. And they found one, they called it bicycle face. It was a symptom of a much larger worry in society. Or a worry about what would happen when women started to move freely. What would happen when they took control of their own lives. People saw this new machine as a threat, not just to old ways, but to women themselves. They thought it was bad for their bodies, bad for their minds, and they invented a condition to prove it. A condition meant to show the dangers of this modern invention. A condition meant to scare women away from the joy and freedom of cycling. It was a fight for control, really. A fight played out on 2 wheels. So, what exactly was bicycle face? It sounds made up now, right? And it kind of was. But in the 1890s, doctors and worried citizens talked about it like it was a real medical condition. They described it with great detail. And they said it was something truly awful. Bicycle face was supposed to be a permanent expression. A look of strain and tension that cycling would cause. Imagine someone riding a bike with great effort. Their jaw might be tight. Their eyes might be wide, staring ahead. Their brow might be furrowed, their mouth might be a thin line. This was the look. But the fear was that it wouldn't go away, even when you got off the bike. People believed that the constant effort of cycling, the need to focus on the road, the strain of balance, it would permanently alter a woman's face. They said her features would become drawn or haggard. Her complexion might turn pale. Her eyes might become wild and staring. Her expression would be fixed in a look of painful effort. She would lose her soft, feminine features. She would look stressed. She would look masculine. Doctors sometimes claimed it came from overexertion. They said women were too delicate for such strenuous activity. Their nerves couldn't handle it. The mental strain of navigating streets, avoiding obstacles, and maintaining balance was too much. It would cause nervous exhaustion, and that exhaustion would show on their faces. Newspapers picked up on this idea. They ran stories about women developing bicycle face. Sometimes they'd show cartoons making fun of it. The idea spread fast. It became a common topic of conversation. People would point out women on bikes and whisper about whether they had it, or if they were developing it. It wasn't just about looks, though. There was an underlying message. It was about women's health. But not just physical health. It was about their mental and emotional well-being, too. The thinking at the time was that women were fragile. They weren't meant for physical challenges. They weren't meant for independent thought or action. So, if a woman rode a bike, she was defying these expectations. She was pushing herself, and bicycle face was the supposed penalty. It was a warning, a visible sign that she was doing something she shouldn't be doing. It was a medical label applied to a social problem. The problem, in many people's eyes, was women stepping out of their traditional roles. Some doctors even suggested that cycling could lead to more serious conditions, things like nervous disorders. Or, even infertility, they linked the physical exertion to a range of imagined ailments, all designed to discourage women from riding, and bicycle face was the most visible symptom of these imagined harms. It was a fear based on very little scientific evidence. No one ever truly proved it was real. But the idea took hold because it tapped into existing anxieties. Anxieties about change, or anxieties about women's liberation. It gave a name to a threat people felt but couldn't quite articulate. It was a convenient way to express disapproval, to discourage a new behavior. The idea of bicycle face was a way to shame women, to make them feel unattractive, to make them question their own strength and independence. It was a powerful tool for those who wanted to maintain the status quo, to keep women at home, to keep them from exploring the world on their own terms. It was a reflection of deeper societal fears about progress and autonomy. Why did this strange fear of bicycle face even pop up? It wasn't just about a bike. It was about much bigger things going on in America in the 1890s. It was about gender roles. It was about who had power, and it was about fear of change. Back then, society had very clear ideas about men and women. Men were supposed to be strong. They worked outside the home. They were active. Women, on the other hand, were seen as delicate. Their place was in the home. They were supposed to be graceful, gentle, and focused on domestic duties. Physical exertion for women was often discouraged. It was believed to be harmful to their delicate constitution. Many people thought that if women were too active, it could damage their reproductive organs. They thought it could make them infertile, or lead to nervous breakdowns. There was a lot of pseudoscientific thinking around women's bodies. It was often used to control their behavior, to keep them from stepping outside their prescribed roles. So, when the bicycle came along, it directly challenged these ideas. It was a machine that demanded physical effort. And it gave women freedom. Women could ride where they wanted, when they wanted. They didn't need a man to take them. This was a huge shift. It meant women were moving into public spaces in new ways. Unchaperoned, independent. This independence scared a lot of people. It wasn't just the bike itself. It was what the bike represented. It represented women gaining autonomy. It represented them leaving the confines of their homes. It represented a breakdown of traditional order. Doctors played a big part in spreading these fears. Many doctors at the time were men. They often held very traditional views about women's health and roles. Some genuinely believed that cycling was bad for women. Others might have been swayed by the prevailing social attitudes. They gave bicycle face a kind of medical legitimacy. They wrote articles about it. They warned their female patients. Their words carried weight. Newspapers also fueled the panic. They loved a good sensational story. Bicycle face was perfect. It combined a new trend, a controversial topic, women's independence, and a scary health warning. It made for compelling headlines, and it spread the idea far and wide. Think about it. Women were starting to demand more rights. They wanted to vote. They wanted access to education and jobs. The bicycle became a symbol of this larger movement. Susan B. Anthony, a famous suffragist, even said that the bicycle had done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. Those who resisted women's progress saw the bike as a threat, and bicycle face was a convenient way to attack that threat. If women looked ugly or sickly from riding bikes, who would want to do it? It was a way to shame them, to make them self-conscious, to make them afraid of the consequences of their independence. It was a form of social control. By medicalizing a perceived negative outcome, society could try to curb a behavior it disapproved of. It wasn't about actual health, it was about maintaining existing power structures. It was about keeping women confined. It was about making sure women stayed feminine in the way society expected them to be. The fear also came from a lack of understanding. People didn't fully grasp the benefits of exercise. Especially for women, they only saw the potential dangers, often exaggerated, and these dangers were almost always linked to women pushing boundaries. So, bicycle face was a symptom of a society grappling with rapid change. A society trying to put new wine into old bottles and getting very anxious when it didn't fit. It showed how deep-seated fears about women's place in the world were, and how quickly those fears could manifest as a supposed health crisis. But here's the thing about Bicycle Face, it didn't last. The fear, for all its hype, started to fade. And it faded because people, especially women, kept riding their bikes. They pushed back. Many women simply ignored the warnings. They loved the freedom the bicycle gave them too much. They loved the feeling of moving quickly. They loved exploring new places. They weren't going to give that up because of some made-up medical condition. They kept pedaling. And as more and more women cycled, it became clear that Bicycle Face wasn't actually happening. No one was permanently stuck with a grimace. And it wasn't just women defying the critic. Some doctors started to speak out against the idea too. They looked at the evidence. Or rather, the lack of it. They couldn't find any real medical basis for Bicycle Face. They said it was nonsense. They pointed out that exercise was generally good for people, not bad. They argued that the supposed symptoms were just normal signs of exertion during physical activity, and that these went away once the activity stopped. The sheer popularity of cycling also helped kill off Bicycle Face. The bicycle craze was too big to be stopped, millions of bikes were sold, entire families started riding. It became a normal part of life for many. When everyone is doing something, it's harder to claim it's dangerous or causes strange deformities. The fear started to look ridiculous when countless women rode without any ill effects. Women's rights advocates also embraced the bicycle. They saw it as a powerful tool for liberation. They actively promoted cycling as a way for women to gain independence and strength. They used it to challenge restrictive clothing and social norms. The bike became a symbol of progress. And they weren't going to let a silly fear like Bicycle Face undermine that progress. They argued that women should be active, they should be independent. Over time, the idea of Bicycle Face became a bit of a joke. People started to laugh at the absurdity of it. It became an example of how ridiculous society's fears about women could be. It was clear that the concerns weren't about actual health, they were about control. As society progressed, views on women's physical activity also changed. People started to understand that exercise was beneficial for everyone, regardless of gender. The women began participating in more sports. The idea of women being too delicate for physical activity slowly started to lose its grip. The bike played a big part in that shift. It helped normalize the idea of active women. The fear of Bicycle Face really faded out by the early 1900s. It just couldn't stand up to reality. Women were riding, they were healthy, they were happy, and they didn't have permanently strained faces. The supposed epidemic never materialized. It was a panic built on fear and prejudice, not on facts. So, the pushback worked. The power of individual choice combined with common sense and a growing understanding of health overcame the scare. It showed that even strong societal fears can be overcome when people experience the benefits of change firsthand. The bicycle kept rolling, and women kept riding. Their faces were fine, they were just enjoying their freedom. It was a win for common sense, and a win for women's independence. The story of Bicycle Face might seem funny now. A strange footnote in history, but it tells us a lot about people and change. It wasn't real, of course. No one developed a permanent strained face from riding a bike, but the fear created was very real. And its legacy is important. What does Bicycle Face tell us? First, it shows how society often reacts to new technology, especially technology that changes social norms. The bicycle was a disruption. It gave people, particularly women, new capabilities. And when new things arrive, people often look for reasons to be afraid. They find ways to connect the new thing to existing anxieties. Second, it tells us a lot about gender roles and fear of women's independence. The 1890s was a time when women were pushing for more rights. The bicycle was a tool for that push. It gave women a way to move freely, a way to be independent. And this independence was scary to many people. Bicycle Face was a way to try and control women, to scare them back into their traditional roles. It was a medical excuse to maintain old power structures. This pattern isn't unique to Bicycle Face. Throughout history, when women have sought more autonomy, their bodies and minds have often been medicalized. Their ambition or independence has been labeled as a sickness or a disorder. This was done to justify limiting their opportunities. We see this with other historical labels too. For example, the idea of hysteria was often used to dismiss women's complaints or ambitions. The story also highlights the power of media and medical authority. When doctors and newspapers talk about a supposed health crisis, people listen. Even if the claims are baseless, they can create real fear. It reminds us to be critical of claims, especially those that target specific groups or behaviors. We should always question the motives behind such warnings. Ultimately, Bicycle Face was a failure. It didn't stop women from riding bikes. The benefits of cycling bike, the freedom, the exercise, the joy outweighed the manufactured fear. Women kept riding, and in doing so, they helped to change society's views on women's physical activity and independence. The bicycle became a powerful symbol of liberation. It helped pave the way for more changes in women's lives. So, while Bicycle Face is a peculiar part of history, it's not just a funny story. It's a lesson. It shows how fear can be used to control people. It shows how society struggles with change. And it shows the resilience of people who push for freedom. The bicycle, a simple machine, played a big role in that fight. It showed that sometimes the most profound changes come from unexpected places, and that common sense and the desire for freedom often win out in the end. The fear of Bicycle Face eventually faded into history, a forgotten warning. But the image of a woman on a bicycle, confidently pedaling forward, remains a strong and enduring symbol of independence.